The golden rays of the setting sun painted the Maui shoreline in brilliant hues of orange and pink, as Karim Abdullah stood at the window of his modest beachfront cottage, still adjusting to the strange feeling of wearing casual clothes instead of his usual formal attire. Just 24 hours ago, he had been Prince Karim bin Hassan Abdullah, heir to one of the most powerful kingdoms in the Middle East. Now he was simply Karim, a supposed businessman taking a sabbatical in Hawaii. The transformation had been meticulously planned over months. With the help of his most trusted advisor, Sarah al-Rashid, he had managed to arrange this temporary escape from the suffocating walls of the palace. Only she knew his true location, having helped him create a carefully crafted cover story about a private spiritual retreat in the mountains. As he walked along the beach, feeling the warm sand between his toes for the first time in his life, Karim reflected on the events that had led him to this drastic decision. The constant pressure of royal obligations, the endless ceremonies, the arranged meetings with potential brides from other royal families, it had all become too much. At 32, he felt like he had never truly lived, never known who he was beyond the carefully constructed image of the perfect crown prince. His phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Everything is stable here. Your father believes you're at the retreat. Be careful, Your Highness." Karim smiled at the formal title. Even in text messages, Sarah maintained protocol. She had been his confidant since childhood, the daughter of his father's most trusted advisor, and the only person who truly understood his need for this brief taste of freedom. The next morning, Karim decided to explore the local area, walking into a small cafe that caught his eye. The informal atmosphere was a sharp contrast to the palatial dining rooms he was accustomed to, but he found himself enjoying the simplicity of ordering his own coffee and finding his own seat. As he sat there, observing the casual interactions of the other patrons, he overheard a conversation that would change the course of his carefully planned escape. "I'm telling you, Emma, this market is impossible right now," a woman's voice carried from the next table. "Nobody wants to commit to the high-end properties, and the middle range is saturated. I need a miracle to meet my targets this quarter." Karim turned slightly, catching sight of a woman in her late 20s with auburn hair and determined green eyes, gesturing animatedly as she spoke to her friend. Something about her energy and obvious passion for her work intrigued him. "You'll figure it out, Sophia," her friend replied. "You always do. Remember last year when you closed that impossible deal with the Japanese investors?" Sophia Martinez, as Karim would later learn was her name, sighed and stirred her coffee. That was different. The market was better then. Now, with all the economic uncertainty. She trailed off, noticing Karim's glance. Their eyes met briefly, and he quickly looked away, unaccustomed to such direct contact with strangers, especially women. Later that evening, fate intervened again when Karim found himself at the Lahaina Grill, one of Maui's most popular restaurants. As he waited for his table, he recognized the real estate agent from the cafe, sitting alone at the bar, reviewing documents on her tablet. Following an impulse he didn't quite understand, Karim approached her. "Excuse me," he said, his accent carefully modulated to sound vaguely European rather than Middle Eastern. "I couldn't help overhearing your conversation this morning at the cafe. You're in real estate." Sophia looked up, surprise flickering across her face as she recognized him. "Yes, I am," she replied, her professional demeanor quickly taking over. "Sophia Martinez, Maui Luxury Properties. Are you looking to buy?" "Perhaps," Karim said, taking the seat next to her. "I'm interested in something private, very private." He emphasized the word, playing into his cover story of a businessman seeking solitude. Something in his manner piqued Sophia's interest. She had dealt with many wealthy clients before, but there was something different about this one. His posture, his way of speaking, the careful way he held himself. It all hinted at someone used to much more formal environments than a casual island restaurant. "Privacy is our specialty," she assured him, reaching for her business card. "Though I have to ask, what brings someone like you to Maui looking for property?" The question was professional, but her tone carried genuine curiosity. Karim had rehearsed his cover story countless times. "I need a break from my regular life," he said, which was true enough. somewhere to decompress and think about my future. Also true, if not the complete truth. As they began to discuss potential properties, neither Karim nor Sophia realized they were embarking on a journey that would challenge everything they thought they knew about love, duty, and the prices we pay for being true to ourselves. Their conversation flowed easily, touching on topics far beyond real estate, their favorite foods, travel experiences, and dreams for the future. Karim found himself sharing more than he'd planned, though always carefully edited to maintain his cover. When they finally parted ways that evening, Sophia handed him her card with her personal cell number written on the back. "Call me tomorrow," she said. "I think I might have exactly what you're looking for." Walking back to his cottage under the stars, Karim felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. For the first time in his life, someone was seeing him as just a man, not a prince. The freedom was intoxicating, but he couldn't ignore the voice in his head warning him that this deception couldn't last forever. Still, as he watched the moonlight dancing on the waves, he allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to be both the prince his people needed and the man he longed to become. The morning sun was already warming the Hawaiian air when Sophia arrived at her office earlier than usual. She couldn't stop thinking about her mysterious client from the previous evening. There was something about him that didn't quite add up. His mannerisms were too refined, his knowledge too extensive for a simple businessman seeking solitude. Opening her laptop, she began researching properties that might suit his requirements, while trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach when she thought about seeing him again. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Good morning. Ms. Martinez, this is Karim. Would it be possible to view some properties today?" The formality of his message made her smile. Who used such proper language in text messages these days? Meanwhile, in his cottage, Karim was pacing nervously. Sarah had sent him concerning news from home. Rumors were beginning to circulate about his absence from public duties. The official story of his spiritual retreat wouldn't hold up forever. "Your father is getting suspicious," Sarah's message warned. "Be careful with your public appearances." When Sophia picked him up in her car later that morning, she noticed his distraction immediately. "Everything okay?" she asked, navigating through the coastal road. "You seem preoccupied." Karim forced a smile. "Just some business matters back home," he said, then quickly changed the subject. "Tell me about the properties you've selected." Sophia had chosen 3 listings that met his criteria for privacy and luxury, while maintaining discretion. As they drove to the first location, she found herself stealing glances at him. His profile was striking. Strong jaw, aristocratic, nose and eyes that seemed to hold secrets she longed to uncover. The first property was a modern villa nestled in the hills, offering spectacular ocean views and complete privacy. As they walked through the house, Sophia noticed how Karim moved through the space with an almost regal bearing. He asked intelligent questions about security systems and property boundaries, showing particular interest in the service quarters, something unusual for most clients. "The staff accommodation seemed quite limited," he observed, then caught himself. "I mean, if one were to require household staff." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Most of our clients handle their own housekeeping or hire local services." "Do you usually travel with a full staff?" Karim realized his mistake and quickly recovered. No, I was just thinking, hypothetically. This place is quite large to maintain alone." As they moved to the second property, their conversation flowed more naturally. Sophia found herself sharing stories about growing up in Maui, her struggles to establish herself in the competitive real estate market, and her dreams of eventually starting her own agency. "What made you choose real estate?" Karim asked as they walked along a private beach belonging to the second property. Sophia paused, considering her answer. "I love helping people find their perfect space in the world," she said finally. "Everyone deserves a place where they can truly be themselves." The words struck a chord with Karim, and he fell silent, lost in thought. During lunch at a small seaside restaurant, Sophia noticed more of his unusual habits. He waited for her to start eating before touching his food, and she caught him almost raising his hand, as if expecting someone to pull out his chair. When the bill came, He seemed momentarily confused by the credit card machine, though he covered it smoothly. The third property was a traditional Hawaiian estate, surrounded by lush gardens and hidden from view by tall palm trees. As they walked through the grand entrance, Sophia watched Karim's face carefully. "This one feels different," she observed. "More like home?" His expression flickered with something she couldn't quite read. "Perhaps too much like home," he murmured, then quickly added, "It's beautiful, but not quite what I'm looking for." As the day drew to a close, they found themselves back at the first property, watching the sunset from its infinity pool deck. The air was heavy with unspoken questions and growing attraction. "What are you really looking for, Karim?" Sophia asked softly, turning to face him. The setting sun cast golden highlights in her auburn hair, and for a moment, he forgot all about his royal duties and carefully constructed lies. "Freedom," he answered honestly, perhaps the first completely truthful thing he'd said all day. "A place where I can just be myself." Their eyes met, and the connection between them crackled with intensity. Sophia felt herself drawn toward him, while Karim struggled with the desire to close the distance between them and the knowledge that every moment he spent with her deepened his deception. The moment was broken by the sharp ring of his phone. Seeing Sarah's name on the screen, Karim stepped away to answer. Sophia couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw how his entire demeanor changed, his shoulders straightening, his voice taking on a more commanding tone as he spoke in rapid-fire Arabic. When he returned, the easy rapport they'd built throughout, the day had slightly shifted. Sophia sensed his withdrawal, the invisible walls going up again. "I should get back," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Thank you for today." As she drove him back to his cottage, Sophia's professional instincts warred with her personal feelings. Everything about this man was a contradiction. His casual clothes but formal manner, his evident wealth but desire for simplicity, his openness in conversation paired with careful evasion of personal details. Dropping him off, she made a decision. Tonight she would do some research on her mysterious client. Little did she know, this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. Late into the night, Sophia sat at her desk, her laptop screen casting a blue glow across her face. She'd spent hours searching for information about her mysterious client, but Karim was proving to be frustratingly elusive. No social media presence, no business profiles, nothing that matched the man she'd spent the day with. It was as if he didn't exist in the digital world. Her phone chimed with a message from him. "I've been thinking about the first property. Could we visit it again tomorrow?" Sophia smiled, despite her frustration with her fruitless search. There was something endearing about his formal texting style that made her heart flutter. The next morning, as she prepared to meet Karim, Sophia received an unexpected call from her friend Emma, who worked at the local luxury hotel. "You won't believe what I just heard," Emma said excitedly. "There's buzz about a Middle Eastern royal family member supposedly staying somewhere on the island incognito. The staff has been told to be on high alert for any unusual security arrangements or special requests." Sophia's heart skipped a beat as her mind connected dots she hadn't even realized were there. Karim's formal manners, his confusion with everyday tasks, the way he carried himself. Could it be? No, she dismissed the thought. That would be too incredible. When she picked him up, Karim was wearing casual designer clothes that somehow looked both expensive and understated. "I hope I'm not taking too much of your time," he said, his accent seeming slightly more pronounced than yesterday. "It's my job," Sophia replied with a warm smile, even as her mind raced with questions. "Besides, I enjoy your company." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and she saw his eyes soften in response. At the property, Karim seemed more relaxed than the previous day, asking detailed questions about the security system and local community. As they walked through the garden, he surprised her by naming several exotic plants, explaining their medicinal properties with the expertise of a botanist. "How do you know so much about plants?" Sophia asked, genuinely curious. A shadow passed over his face. "My mother..." She loved gardening. She had an extensive botanical garden where I grew up. She taught me everything about plants before she... He trailed off, pain flickering across his features. Sophia instinctively reached out and touched his arm, feeling him tense slightly before relaxing into her touch. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken emotions. Their tour was interrupted by another call, which Karim stepped away to take. This time, Sophia caught fragments of his conversation in Arabic, and though she couldn't understand the words, the authoritative tone of his voice sent shivers down her spine. When he returned, his jaw was tight with tension. "Is everything all right?" she asked softly. "Just some complicated family matters," he replied, running a hand through his hair in a rare display of frustration. "Sometimes it feels impossible to balance who you are with who you're expected to be." The vulnerability in his voice touched something deep within Sophia. "I understand that feeling," she said, thinking of her own struggles to meet her family's expectations while pursuing her dreams. "My parents wanted me to become a doctor like my sister. They couldn't understand why I chose real estate instead." Karim looked at her with newfound interest. "How did you handle their disappointment?" "I showed them that following my own path didn't mean I was rejecting their values," she explained. "It just meant I had to find my own way to make them proud." Their eyes met, and for a moment all the pretense fell away. Karim felt an overwhelming urge to tell her everything about his royal heritage, the weight of his responsibilities, how meeting her had made him question everything he'd ever known about duty and desire. Instead, he asked, "Would you have dinner with me tonight? Not as a client and agent, but just us?" Sophia's heart raced. "I'd like that," she said softly, even as her professional instincts warned her about getting personally involved with a client who was clearly hiding something significant. They agreed to meet at a small out-of-the-way restaurant that Sophia recommended. As she drove home to prepare for their dinner, her phone buzzed with an email from Emma. "Found something interesting about your mystery man," the subject line read. Sitting in her driveway, Sophia's finger hovered over the email. Did she want to know? Would discovering his secrets ruin the magic that was building between them? The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold as she made her decision and clicked the email open. What she read made her hands shake and her breath catch in her throat. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, and the picture they formed was more incredible than anything she could have imagined. As she prepared for their dinner date, Sophia knew that tonight would either be the beginning of something extraordinary or the end of a beautiful dream. The restaurant Sophia had chosen was a hidden gem, tucked away in a quiet corner of Lahaina. String lights twinkled in the garden setting, and the sound of gentle waves provided a soothing backdrop to the intimate atmosphere. Sophia arrived first, her emerald green dress catching the soft lighting as she waited at the secluded table she'd requested. Her mind was still reeling from Emma's email. The attached photos showed newspaper clippings from Middle Eastern media outlets, headlines about Prince Karim bin Hassan Abdullah, heir to the throne of one of the region's most powerful kingdoms. The resemblance was undeniable. The man she'd been showing properties to, the man she'd grown increasingly attracted to, was actually a crown prince. Karim arrived precisely on time, looking devastatingly handsome, in a casual but clearly expensive linen shirt and slacks. His eyes lit up when he saw her, and for a moment, Sophia forgot all about her discoveries. He moved toward her with that same graceful bearing that she now recognized as royal training, and her heart skipped a beat. "You look beautiful," he said softly, taking his seat across from her. The candlelight caught the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, and Sophia felt herself being drawn in despite her reservations. As they ordered drinks, Sophia noticed how the waiter seemed to pick up on something in Karim's demeanor, providing an extra level of attentive service without being asked. It was just one more piece of evidence supporting what she now knew to be true. Their conversation flowed easily at first, discussing their shared love of architecture and design. Karim spoke passionately about historical preservation, revealing an extensive knowledge of ancient buildings that went far beyond casual interest. "You seem to know a lot about historical architecture," Sophia said carefully, watching his reaction. "Is that something you studied formally?" A flash of something, awareness perhaps, crossed his face. Yes, actually, I had extensive education in many subjects. My father believed in being well-rounded. Your father sounds like a demanding man, Sophia probed gently. Karim's hand tightened slightly around his water glass. He is, traditional. He has certain expectations about the path my life should take. As their main courses arrived, Sophia decided to take a risk. I've always been fascinated by traditional families, she said, maintaining eye contact with him, especially those with long histories of leadership and responsibility. It must be challenging to balance personal desires with duty. The look Karim gave her was sharp and searching. Why do you say that? He asked, his voice carefully controlled. Just an observation, Sophia replied, her heart pounding. You carry yourself, like someone who's used to responsibility, to having others depend on you. The tension at the table was palpable now. Karim set down his fork, studying her face intently. What exactly are you asking, Sophia? Before she could respond, a commotion at the restaurant entrance caught their attention. A group of tourists had recognized someone, phones were being raised, and excited whispers were spreading through the dining room. Karim's expression changed instantly, a mask of careful neutrality falling into place. He raised his hand slightly, and Sophia was startled to see two men in casual clothes, men she hadn't even noticed were in the restaurant, subtly moved to block the view of their table. You have security, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Their eyes met across the table, and in that moment all pretense fell away. You know, he said simply. I know, Sophia confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper. Your Highness. The use of his title seemed to pain him. Please, he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. Just Karim. I'm still the same person you've known these past few days. Are you? Sophia asked, though she didn't pull her hand away. The man I've been getting to know is a businessman on sabbatical, not the crown prince of a kingdom. The pain in his eyes was real. Everything I've shared with you about myself, my feelings, my thoughts, my dreams, that was all real. The only thing I concealed was my title. A pretty significant thing to conceal, Sophia pointed out, but her tone was gentle. She could see the conflict raging within him. I needed to know, he said, his voice intense. I needed to know if someone could care for me as just a man, not a prince. These past few days with you have been the most real moments of my life. A server approached their table, but one look from Karim sent him retreating. The two security men were still maintaining their discreet barrier, but Sophia could sense their heightened alertness. Why are you really here? She asked, finally voicing the question that had been nagging at her since her discovery. Karim was quiet for a long moment, his thumb absently stroking the back of her hand. I've spent my entire life being who I was. Supposed to be, he finally said. The perfect prince, the dutiful son, the future king. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of who I am beneath all those roles. I came here to find myself, to understand who I am when no one is watching, when no one expects anything from me. And have you found what you're looking for? Sophia asked, her heart racing at the intensity of his gaze. I'm finding something I never expected to find, he replied softly, something that terrifies me more than losing my crown ever could. The implications of his words hung heavy in the air between them. They were standing on the edge of something profound, something that could either destroy them both or become the kind of love stories are written about. The drive back from the restaurant was filled with a charged silence. Karim's security detail followed discreetly in another vehicle, their presence now obvious to Sophia in a way it hadn't been before. As she navigated the coastal road, her mind raced with the implications of everything that had been revealed. I want to show you something, Karim said suddenly, breaking the silence. Would you trust me enough to take a small detour? Sophia glanced at him, noting how the moonlight softened his features, making him look more like the man she'd been falling for, and less like the prince he'd revealed himself to be. Okay, she agreed softly, following his directions. He guided her to a secluded beach, one she'd shown him during their property tours. The security detail parked at a discreet distance, maintaining their protective watch while giving them privacy. As they walked along the moonlit shore, their shoes in hand. Karim began to speak. "When I was 7 years old," he said, his voice carrying over the gentle surf, "I had a teacher who would sneak me comic books. They were my escape, stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. My father found out and dismissed her immediately. That was my first lesson in what it meant to be royal. Everything in my life would be carefully controlled, every decision measured against the weight of tradition and expectation." Sophia listened intently, seeing him in a new light. "It must have been lonely," she observed, understanding now why he'd seemed so amazed by simple things like ordering his own coffee or walking on the beach. "Lonely, yes, but also suffocating," he admitted. "Every moment of every day is choreographed. Even now, those men watching us," he gestured toward the security detail. "They'll report every detail of this conversation to my father's advisors. It's why I had to create this escape, this chance to just be myself." They stopped walking, and Karim turned to face her. "Sophia, what you must understand is that meeting you wasn't part of the plan. You've made me question everything I thought I knew about my life, my future." "And what exactly am I supposed to do with that?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You're a crown prince. In a few weeks you'll return to your kingdom, to your real life. Where does that leave me?" Before he could answer, his phone buzzed urgently. The screen displayed Sarah's name, and the expression that crossed his face told Sophia it wasn't good news. He answered in Arabic, his tone growing increasingly concerned as the conversation progressed. When he hung up, his face was pale in the moonlight. "My father knows," he said simply. "Someone at the restaurant must have posted photos online. They've gone viral in my country. The palace is in chaos." Sophia felt her heart sink. "What does this mean?" "It means I have to make a decision," he replied, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Sarah says my father is demanding I return immediately. The council is meeting in emergency session. There are concerns about political stability if the crown prince is seen as abandoning his duties." The reality of who he was, who they were, crashed over Sophia like a wave. This wasn't just about them anymore. Their actions had international implications, could affect the lives of millions of people. "You have to go back," she said, softly, though the words felt like they were being torn from her heart. "No," Karim said firmly, surprising her. "Not yet. I've spent my entire life doing what duty demands. For once, I want to choose my own path." He reached for her hands, holding them tightly in his. "Stay with me. Give me time to figure out a way to make this work." "Make what work?" Sophia asked, her practical nature asserting itself. "I'm a real estate agent from Maui. You're the crown prince of a kingdom. How could this possibly work?" "Because for the first time in my life, I'm willing to fight for what I want," he replied, with an intensity that took her breath away. "My father, the council, tradition, they've controlled every aspect of my life, but they can't control how I feel about you." The sound of approaching vehicles interrupted them. 2 more black SUVs had arrived, and men in suits were approaching, with purposeful strides. Sophia recognized the woman leading them, Sarah al-Rashid, whose photo she'd seen in her research. "Your Highness," Sarah called out, her voice urgent, "we need to move you to a secure location immediately. The press has discovered your whereabouts." Karim's grip on Sophia's hands tightened. "Whatever happens next," he said quickly, "know that every moment with you has been real. Promise me you won't give up on us." Before Sophia could respond, they were surrounded by security personnel. Sarah was efficiently organizing their evacuation, her years of training evident in every precise movement. As they were ushered towards separate vehicles, Sophia caught one last glimpse of Karim's face, seeing in it both determination and fear. Sitting in her own car minutes later, watching the convoy of black vehicles disappear into the night, Sophia wondered if she'd just lived through a modern fairy tale or the beginning of an international scandal. Either way, she knew with absolute certainty that her life would never be the same. Sophia woke up to her phone exploding with notifications. Overnight, her social media accounts had been flooded with followers and messages from around the world. News outlets were running stories about the Hawaiian realtor who captured a prince's heart, complete with photos from their dinner and beach walk. Her simple life had suddenly become international news. At her office, Emma rushed in without knocking. "Have you seen this?" she asked, holding up her tablet. On the screen was a headline from a Middle Eastern news outlet. "Crown Prince's romance sparks constitutional crisis." The accompanying article detailed heated debates in the Royal Council about the appropriateness of their heir's behavior and choice of companion. "It's crazy out there," Emma continued. "There are reporters camped outside the building. How are you handling all this?" Sophia stared at her computer screen, where dozens of email inquiries from journalists filled her inbox. "I honestly don't know," she admitted. "Last night everything seemed possible. In the daylight, it all feels like a dream." Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Miss Martinez, this is Sarah Al-Rashid. His Highness requests your presence at a secure location. A car will pick you up in 1 hour. Please pack for several days." Emma read the message over her shoulder. "Several days? What about your listings, your appointments?" "Can you handle them?" Sophia asked, already knowing she would go. Despite the chaos, despite the impossibility of their situation, she needed to see Karim again. The car that arrived was armored and driven by one of the security personnel she recognized from the night before. They drove for nearly an hour, eventually arriving at a prestigious private estate on the other side of the island. Sarah was waiting at the entrance. "Ms. Martinez," she greeted formally, though her expression was kind. "Before you see His Highness, there are some things you need to understand about the situation we're facing." Inside a luxurious study, Sarah showed Sophia several news reports from their kingdom. The coverage was intense, with some outlets celebrating the prince's modern approach to love, while others condemned him for breaking with tradition. Political opponents were using the situation to question his fitness to rule. "The king has given His Highness 24 hours to return home," Sarah explained. "After that, he's threatening to name his younger brother as heir." Sophia felt the weight of responsibility crushing her chest. "I never meant to cause such chaos," she whispered. "No one is blaming you," Sarah assured her. "But you need to understand what's at stake. His Highness Karim, but he's not just risking his crown, he's risking the stability of an entire nation." Before Sophia could respond, Karim entered the room. He looked tired but determined, his casual clothes replaced with a more formal suit. The change in his appearance made her heart ache. It was as if the man she'd known was being slowly replaced by the prince he had to be. "Leave us, please," he commanded softly, and Sarah withdrew, with a respectful bow. As soon as they were alone, Karim's formal demeanor cracked. He crossed the room in 3 quick strides and pulled Sophia into his arms. "I'm sorry," he murmured into her hair. "I'm so sorry for dragging you into this storm." Sophia allowed herself a moment to sink into his embrace before pulling back to look at him. "Your father is really going to disinherit you?" "He's trying to force my hand," Karim explained, leading her to a comfortable seating area. "But he's underestimating my resolve. I've spent my entire life preparing to be king, not because I wanted the crown, but because I believed I could make a difference. Now I realize that to be the kind of leader my people deserve, I need to be true to myself first." "And what does that mean?" Sophia asked, her heart racing. "It means I'm not going back yet," he said firmly. "I've asked Sarah to arrange a video conference with my father. I want him to meet you, to understand that this isn't some foolish escape or temporary infatuation." Sophia's eyes widened. "Meet the king? Karim, I don't know the first thing about royal protocol or—" He silenced her with a gentle finger to her lips. "That's exactly why I fell in love with you. You see me for who I am, not what I represent." The word love hung in the air between them, neither having used it before this moment. Sophia felt tears welling in her eyes. "This is crazy," she whispered. "A week ago, I was just a regular person, and now you're still that same wonderful person," Karim interrupted, "who challenged me, surprised me, and made me believe that I could be both the man I want to be and the leader my people need." A knock at the door interrupted them. Sarah entered, her expression grave. "Your Highness, the king is demanding to speak with you immediately. He's on a secure line." Karim stood, his royal bearing returning automatically. "Stay," he said to Sophia. Whatever he says, whatever happens next, I want you by my side." As they followed Sarah to the communication room, Sophia felt like she was walking through a dream. The equipment was state-of-the-art, the security personnel numerous and alert. On the large screen before them, the face of King Hassan appeared, his expression stern and commanding. Sophia watched as Karim straightened his spine and lifted his chin, transforming before her eyes into Crown Prince Karim bin Hassan Abdullah. The two men stared at each other across thousands of miles, neither willing to break first, while the fate of their kingdom and her heart hung in the balance. The tension in the communication room was palpable as King Hassan's stern face filled the screen. His traditional royal attire and commanding presence made Sophia acutely aware of the vast gulf between their worlds. When he spoke, his voice was deep and controlled, but carried an undercurrent of anger. "My son," he began in English, his accent more pronounced than Karim's, "you have created quite a spectacle. The entire world is watching our family, our kingdom, waiting to see how we handle this situation." Karim remained standing tall, his hand finding Sophia's behind the camera's view. "Father, I would like to introduce you to Miss Sophia Martinez. She is the woman I have chosen to—" "Chosen?" the king interrupted, his voice sharp. "You speak of choice as if you were a common man. You are the crown prince of our kingdom. Your choices affect millions of people. Your responsibilities extend far beyond your personal desires." Sophia felt Karim's hand tighten around hers. "With all due respect, Father, it is precisely because I understand my responsibilities that I stand firm in my decision. Our kingdom needs leadership that embraces both tradition and progress." The king's eyes narrowed as they fell on Sophia. "Miss Martinez," he addressed her directly, making her heart jump. "You seem like an intelligent young woman. Surely you understand that this infatuation cannot continue. The crown prince has duties, expectations. Our traditions have preserved our kingdom for centuries." Drawing strength from Karim's presence, Sophia stepped forward. "Your Majesty," she began, her voice steadier than she felt, "I have the utmost respect for your traditions and your kingdom, but I also know your son. His strength, his vision, his dedication to his people, these qualities aren't diminished by his capacity to love. They're enhanced by it." A flicker of surprise crossed the king's face at her response. For a moment, the stern mask slipped, revealing a father concerned for his son and his kingdom. "You speak well, Miss Martinez, but pretty words cannot change centuries of tradition. Karim, you have responsibilities to your people, to your heritage." "And what of my responsibility to my heart?" Karim challenged. "You taught me that a great leader must be true to himself. That authenticity is the foundation of genuine leadership. How can I lead our people if I cannot be honest about who I am and what I believe?" Sarah, who had been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward with a tablet displaying various news headlines. "Your Majesty, if I may," she interjected respectfully. "The public response has been mixed, but there is significant support among the younger generation. They see Prince Karim's actions as a sign that the monarchy can evolve while maintaining its core values." The king was silent for a long moment, studying his son's face. "You believe this woman is worth risking everything we have built?" "Everything. You have trained for your entire life." "I believe love makes us stronger, not weaker," Karim replied firmly. "I believe our kingdom can honor its traditions while embracing change. And I believe Sophia makes me a better man and would make me a better king." Sophia's heart swelled at his words, even as she felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. This wasn't just about their love anymore. It was about the future of an entire nation. "Very well," the king said finally, his voice heavy with authority. "You wish to prove yourself a modern leader? Then I will give you a challenge. Return home, both of you. Let Miss Martinez experience our world, our traditions, our responsibilities. Let her understand what she would be sacrificing her freedom for. If after 1 month you both still believe this path is right, we will discuss the possibility of changing certain traditions." The offer hung in the air like a sword suspended by a thread. Sophia felt Karim tense beside her, recognizing both the opportunity and the trap in his father's words. "And if we refuse?" Karim asked carefully. Then you will have made your choice, the king replied, his voice hard. The council meets in 48 hours to discuss the succession. Be on a kame. Plane home before then, or your brother will be named crown prince. Those are my terms. The screen went dark, leaving them in stunned silence. Sarah quickly excused herself, understanding that the couple needed privacy to process this ultimatum. Karim turned to Sophia, his eyes filled with conflict and love. I cannot ask you to give up your life here, to face the scrutiny and pressure of my world. It would be selfish of me. You're not asking, Sophia replied, reaching up to touch his face. I'm choosing. But Karim, are you sure? Your father's right. This affects millions of people. The crown, your kingdom. My kingdom needs change, he said firmly. It needs leaders who understand that strength comes from embracing progress while honoring tradition. But I need you to be absolutely certain about this. The palace, the protocols, the constant scrutiny, it's not an easy life. Sophia took a deep breath, thinking about her simple life in Maui, her career, her dreams. Then she thought about Karim, about the way he looked at her, about the possibility of building something extraordinary together. I'm scared, she admitted honestly. But I'm more scared of spending the rest of my life wondering, what if? If you believe we can make this work, then I'm willing to try. Karim pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she might disappear. We have 48 hours to prepare for a journey that will change both our lives forever. Are you ready? Looking up into his eyes, Sophia saw their future, challenging, complicated, but filled with possibility. Yes, she whispered, sealing their fate with a kiss. The next 24 hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Sarah had transformed the estate into a makeshift royal preparation center with advisors, cultural experts, and protocol officers flying in from around the world. Sophia's head spun as she tried to absorb the cascade of information being thrust upon her. Your Highness, Sarah addressed Karim as they sat in the estate's library, the royal tailor will arrive within the hour. We need to ensure Miss Martinez has appropriate attire for her arrival and initial appearances. Sophia, who had been practicing the proper way to curtsy for the past hour, looked up in alarm. Initial appearances. I thought we'd have time to adjust first. The media will be watching from the moment we land, Karim explained gently. In our kingdom, every move we make is scrutinized and interpreted. We need to be prepared. An elegant middle-aged woman named Amira, who had been brought in to teach Sophia royal protocol, stepped forward with a thick binder. Let's review the basics of palace etiquette again, she said kindly. Remember, when addressing the king, you must always wait for him to speak first. Maintain eye contact, but don't stare, curtsy at precisely the right angle, and never turn your back to him when leaving the room, Sophia recited, her voice carrying a hint of hysteria. But how am I supposed to remember all of this, while also remembering not to use my left hand for anything, never cross my legs in public, and maintain perfect posture at all times? Karim crossed the room and took her hands in his, concern evident in his eyes. We can delay this if you need more time, he offered, though they both knew that wasn't really an option with the council meeting looming. Sophia squeezed his hands and took a deep breath. No, I can do this. I have to do this. It's just overwhelming. Perhaps, Sarah interjected diplomatically, we should take a brief break. The tailor will need Miss Martinez refreshed for the fittings. As the others filed out of the library, Karim held Sophia back. Once they were alone, he pulled her into his arms, and she felt some of the tension leave her body at his touch. Do you know what I thought the first time I saw you? He asked softly. Sophia looked up at him, grateful for the momentary respite from protocol lessons. What? I thought you were the most genuine person I'd ever met. The way you spoke your mind, the passion you showed for your work, the light in your eyes when you laughed. It was all so real, so unpretentious. That's what I fell in love with. And now I'm learning to be anything but genuine, she said with a weak laugh. Everything has to be calculated, measured, perfect. No, Karim said firmly. You're learning the dance of royal life, yes, but that doesn't mean you have to lose yourself. In fact, it's crucial that you don't. My father's challenge isn't just about whether you can learn proper etiquette. It's about whether you can remain true to yourself while navigating our world. Before Sophia could respond, a commotion outside caught their attention. Through the library windows, they could see several cars pulling up to the estate. The royal tailor had arrived, along with what appeared to be an entire fashion entourage. "So, Your Highness," Sarah called from the doorway, "we need to begin the fittings. And Miss Martinez, we have a team of stylists here to discuss your public image." Sophia felt panic rising in her chest again. "Public image?" "Trust me," Karim whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead before stepping back. "Just be yourself." The next few hours were a blur of fabric swatches, makeup consultations, and heated debates about appropriate heel heights for various occasions. The royal tailor, a dignified woman named Madame Fatima, clucked disapprovingly at Sophia's casual island wardrobe. "We must transform you," she declared, surrounded by racks of elegant clothing. "The people must see you as worthy of their prince." "With all due respect," Sophia said, finding her voice, "I want to look appropriate, but I won't let you transform me into someone I'm not. I need to be comfortable in these clothes, not just look good in photographs." Madame Fatima paused, studying Sophia with new interest. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. "Good," she said simply. "You have spirit. We can work with that." As the day progressed, Sophia began to find small victories in these challenges. She worked with Madame Fatima to select clothes that honored royal protocols while maintaining elements of her personal style. She absorbed Amira's lessons on etiquette while adding her own natural grace to the movements. Late that evening, as she stood before a mirror in one of her new outfits, a modern take on traditional formal wear, Sarah appeared behind her. "You're doing better than you think," she said, adjusting Sophia's collar slightly. "The key to surviving royal life is finding the balance between adaptation and authenticity. I've watched many try and fail because they either refused to adapt at all or lost themselves completely in the process." Sophia turned to face the woman who had become something of a mentor in this crash course on royal life. "How do you know?" "I won't fail too," Sarah's expression softened, "because I see the way you look at him not as a prince but as a man, and I see the way he looks at you, not as someone to be molded into a princess, but as someone who makes him want to be a better leader." A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Karim, looking tired but determined. "The royal jet is being prepared," he announced. "We leave for home in 12 hours. The reality of their situation hit Sophia anew. In 12 hours, she would be leaving behind everything she knew, flying halfway across the world to face a kingdom that was already divided over her relationship with their prince. But as she looked at Karim, she saw in his eyes the same mix of fear and determination that she felt in her heart. They were in this together, for better or worse, and somehow that made even the most daunting challenges ahead seem possible. The royal jet gleamed under the early morning Hawaiian sun as Sophia climbed the stairs, her heart pounding with each step. The interior was more luxurious than anything she'd ever seen, all cream leather and polished wood, with the kingdom's crest subtly embroidered on each headrest. As she settled into her seat, the reality of what she was doing finally hit her full force. "Having second thoughts?" Karim asked softly, taking the seat beside her. He had resumed his more formal attire, and Sophia could see him gradually slipping back into his royal role with each passing hour. "Not second thoughts," she replied, reaching for his hand. "More like 20th thoughts. But I'm still here." Sarah, seated across from them, was reviewing security briefings with the team. "Your Highness, will be landing at the military airbase rather than the main airport. The king has arranged for minimal press coverage of your arrival, but we should still expect some cameras." As the jet took off, Sophia watched Maui disappear beneath the clouds. She thought about the hasty goodbye she'd said to Emma that morning, the quick emails to her clients explaining her sudden emergency leave of absence, the small apartment she'd hurriedly packed up. Her entire life condensed into a few suitcases and rushed farewells. "Tell me more about your home," she said to Karim, trying to focus on what lay ahead rather than what she was leaving behind. "Not the official history. Tell me about your favorite places, the hidden corners of the palace, the things tourists never see." Karim's eyes lit up, and for a moment he looked more like the man she'd met in Hawaii than the crown prince he was returning to being. "There's a garden my mother designed when I was young," he began, his voice warm with memory. "Ends filled with night-blooming flowers that make the air feel magical after sunset. That's where I used to go when the weight of expectations became too heavy." For the next few hours, as they flew across the Pacific, Karim shared stories of his childhood home. He told her about the ancient library with its collection of priceless manuscripts, the hidden courtyard where he learned to ride horses, the modern wing his father had added to house their technological operations. Sophia tried to memorize every detail, knowing she would need these intimate glimpses of palace life to navigate her new world. Sarah occasionally joined their conversation, adding context and protocol notes that would help Sophia understand the complex social hierarchy she was about to enter. "The first week will be the most challenging," she explained. "Every member of the court will be watching, evaluating how you handle yourself. But remember, you're not alone in this." As they approached their final descent, Karim grew quieter, more contemplative. Sophia could sense him mentally preparing for their return, for the immediate scrutiny they would face. The sun was setting over the kingdom as they began their approach. The ancient city spread out below them like a tapestry of lights and shadows. "Look," Karim said softly, pointing out the window. "That's the palace." Sophia gasped as she saw it, a magnificent blend of traditional architecture and modern elements, its white stones glowing golden in the setting sun. The scale of it was overwhelming, a physical reminder of the magnitude of what she was stepping into. "Your Highness," Sarah interrupted gently, "we need to prepare for landing. Miss Martinez, are you ready to change?" The next 30 minutes were a flurry of activity as Sophia changed into one of the carefully selected arrival outfits, a modern interpretation of traditional dress that Madame Fatima had designed specifically for this moment. As she studied her reflection in the jet's bathroom mirror, she barely recognized herself. "You look perfect," Sarah assured her, making a final adjustment to Sophia's hair. "Remember what we practiced. Let Karim exit first, follow 3 steps behind, smile naturally but not too broadly, and keep my eyes forward but my head slightly bowed," Sophia finished. "I remember." When she returned to the main cabin, she found Karim had also changed into formal attire, complete with military decorations. He looked every inch the crown prince. Now, but when their eyes met, she still saw her Karim there. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, taking her hands in his, "remember that I love you, not for who they might try to make you become, but for who you are." The jet touched down smoothly on the military airstrip. Through the windows, Sophia could see the welcoming committee, a mix of military officers, royal officials, and what appeared to be carefully selected members of the press. "Your Highness," Sarah announced, "they're ready for us." As the jet's door opened and the stairs were positioned, Sophia took one final deep breath. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The chance meeting in a cafe, the whirlwind romance, the impossible choice that didn't feel like a choice at all because her heart had already decided. "Ready?" Karim asked, standing at the jet's door. Sophia straightened her spine, lifted her chin slightly, but not too much as she'd been taught, and gave him a small nod. "Ready?" Together they stepped out into the warm evening air of their new shared future, the cameras already flashing, the world watching to see what would happen when a Hawaiian real estate agent dared to fall in love with a crown prince. The palace was even more overwhelming up close than it had appeared from the air. As their motorcade passed through the ornate golden gates, Sophia felt as though she was entering another world entirely. The pristine gardens, marble fountains, and ancient architecture spoke of centuries of tradition and power. "Remember," Sarah whispered from beside her in the car, "the king will receive you in the blue room. It's less formal than the throne room, but every detail of protocol still matters." Karim, riding in a separate car ahead of them as tradition dictated, had already disappeared into the palace. Sophia wouldn't see him again until after her formal presentation to the king, another tradition that suddenly felt like torture. As their car came to a stop, a team of attendants materialized to escort Sophia through the palace. The corridors seemed endless, each more opulent than the last, with priceless artworks and ancient tapestries adorning the walls. Palace staff lined the hallways, bowing as she passed, their eyes following her with undisguised curiosity. They paused in an antechamber where Madame Fatima was waiting to make last-minute adjustments to Sophia's appearance. "Remember," the royal tailor said as she adjusted the drape of Sophia's dress, "you're not just wearing clothes, you're wearing the dignity of the royal family. Every fold, every movement matters." Sarah checked her phone and nodded. "It's time, the king is ready to receive you." The blue room, as it turned out, was aptly named. Various shades of blue dominated the decor, from the Persian carpets to the silk wall coverings. King Hassan stood at the far end of the room, his presence commanding attention even in this less formal setting. Karim stood slightly behind him, and Sophia drew strength from his presence. Following her intensive training, Sophia executed a perfect curtsy. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The king studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Miss Martinez," he finally said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "Welcome to our home. I trust your journey was comfortable." "Yes, Your Majesty, thank you for your hospitality." "Hospitality is sacred in our culture," the king replied, moving to take a seat and gesturing for her to do the same. "As are our traditions, our heritage, and our responsibility to our people. These are not small things to be cast aside for. Personal feelings." Sophia felt Karim tense behind his father, but she maintained her composure. "I understand the weight of tradition, Your Majesty, but I also believe that traditions can evolve while maintaining their core values." A flicker of interest crossed the king's face. "How you speak boldly for someone in your position." "I speak honestly, Your Majesty. Isn't that what you would want in someone who might one day help represent your kingdom?" The king's eyebrows rose slightly, and for a moment, Sophia feared she'd overstepped. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a warm, genuine sound that transformed his stern face. "Well said, Miss Martinez, but pretty words in a private audience are one thing. The reality of royal life is quite another." He rose from his chair, signaling the end of the audience. "You have 1 month to prove that you can adapt to our world without losing the spirit that my son seems to value so highly. We will see if that spirit can withstand the pressures of court life." As if on cue, the doors opened to reveal a group of elegantly dressed women. The ladies of the court, Sophia realized, remembering Sarah's briefings. Their scrutiny was immediate and intense, their polite smiles barely masking their curiosity, and in some cases, their disapproval. "Ladies," the king announced, "please show Miss Martinez to her quarters and help her become acquainted with palace life." With that, he swept from the room, leaving Sophia to face her first real test of court politics. The women surrounded her immediately, their greetings perfectly proper, but their questions subtly probing. "What a charming outfit," one said, her eyes critically assessing Sophia's carefully chosen ensemble. "So innovative." "We're all very curious about life in Hawaii," another added. "Such a different world from ours." Sophia recognized the challenge in their words. These women had been raised from birth to navigate court politics, to wield words like weapons and smiles like shields. They were testing her, watching for any sign of weakness or insecurity. Drawing on an inner strength she didn't know she possessed, Sophia smiled warmly. "I would love to tell you about Hawaii," she said, her voice clear and confident. "And I hope you'll share your stories with me as well. After all, this kingdom's history and culture are now part of my journey too." Her response seemed to surprise them, and Sophia caught a few genuine smiles among the diplomatic ones. From across the room she saw Sarah give her an approving nod, while Karim's eyes shone with pride. As the ladies led her from the blue room, chattering about palace protocols and upcoming social events, Sophia caught glimpses of her new life through the palace windows. The sun was setting over the city, painting the ancient buildings in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere in those winding streets, millions of people were going about their lives, all of them now watching to see if this foreign woman was worthy of their future king. Running her fingers along the cool marble of a windowsill, Sophia made a silent promise to herself. She would learn their ways, respect their traditions, but she would not lose herself in the process. The king wanted to see if her spirit could withstand the pressures of court life. She would show him that true strength comes not from conforming to expectations, but from staying true to oneself while rising to meet them. 2 weeks into her stay at the palace, Sophia stood at the window of her private chambers, watching the sunrise paint the ancient city in shades of pink and gold. She'd developed a morning ritual of rising early to have these quiet moments to herself before the whirlwind of palace life began. A gentle knock at the door announced Sarah's arrival. "Good morning," she said, entering with a tablet in hand. "Are you ready to review today's schedule?" Sophia nodded, already dressed in one of the elegant ensembles Madame Fatima had created for her. She'd learned quickly that every appearance, even the most casual, needed to be carefully planned. "The Women's Education Initiative meeting is at 10, Sarah began, scrolling through the schedule. Then lunch with the Ladies' Charitable Society, followed by the tour of the new Children's Hospital wing, Sophia finished. She'd been studying these schedules religiously, determined to prove she could handle the responsibilities of royal life. Sarah looked up with approval. "You're learning quickly. But today's main event is the garden party. All the influential families will be there, including some who have been vocal about their concerns regarding your relationship with His Highness." Over the past 2 weeks, Sophia had begun to understand the complex web of relationships and expectations that governed palace life. She'd also discovered that she had both allies and opponents among the nobility. Some, particularly the younger generation, saw her presence as a sign of positive change. Others viewed her as a threat to centuries of tradition. "Lady Amara has been particularly supportive," Sophia noted, referring to one of the king's cousins, who had taken her under her wing. "She's helped me understand so much about the court's dynamics." "Yes, but be careful," Sarah warned. "Even your supporters have their own agendas. Lady Amara's daughter was once considered a potential match for His Highness. Her support of you sends a particular message to certain factions." A soft knock interrupted them, and Karim entered, looking princely even in his mourning attire. The strict protocols about their interactions had been one of the hardest adjustments for Sophia. Gone were the casual touches and easy intimacy they'd shared in Hawaii. Here, every interaction was watched and judged. "How are you holding up?" he asked, maintaining a proper distance but his eyes conveying all the warmth he couldn't show physically. "I'm adapting," Sophia replied with a small smile, "though I still haven't mastered the art of eating dates without making a mess." Their shared laugh was interrupted by another knock. Lady Amara entered, her elegant presence filling the room. "My dear," she said to Sophia, "I hope you don't mind the early intrusion, but I wanted to speak with you before the day's events begin." Sarah and Karim tactfully excused themselves, leaving Sophia with her mentor. Lady Amara waited until the door closed before speaking. "You've made remarkable progress," she began, "but today will be crucial. The garden party isn't just a social event. It's an opportunity for the old guard to evaluate you. They'll be watching to see if you can balance modernity with tradition." Sophia nodded, understanding the subtext. "Like the changes I suggested for the Women's Education Initiative." "Exactly," Lady Amara smiled approvingly. "Your idea to combine traditional crafts with modern business education was brilliant, progressive enough to make a difference, but respectful enough of our customs to be acceptable. That's the kind of balance you'll need to strike today." As they discussed strategies for navigating the garden party, Sophia reflected on how much she'd learned in 2 weeks. The palace protocols that had once seemed suffocating now felt like a complex dance she was slowly mastering. She'd discovered that real power in the court often lay in subtle gestures and carefully chosen words. Later that morning, at the Women's Education Initiative meeting, Sophia presented her revised proposals. She'd spent hours studying the kingdom's educational history, understanding the delicate balance between progress and tradition. As she spoke, she could see the approval in the faces of both the progressive and conservative members of the committee. "Miss Martinez has shown remarkable insight into our culture," one elderly committee member commented afterward. "Perhaps some of us were too quick to judge." The hospital tour proved equally successful. Sophia had insisted on learning basic greetings in the local dialect, and her efforts to connect with the staff and patients in their own language earned her genuine smiles and respect. But the real test would be the garden party. As Sophia prepared for the event, choosing a gown that perfectly blended modern style with traditional modesty, she thought about how far she'd come from her days showing properties in Maui. "Ready?" Sarah asked, appearing at her door. Sophia took one last look in the mirror. The woman who looked back at her was both familiar and transformed, still herself, but with an added layer of grace and confidence that came from facing and overcoming daily challenges. "Yes," she replied, smoothing her gown. "I'm ready." As they walked through the palace corridors toward the gardens, Sophia could hear the murmur of voices and soft music drifting through the air. She thought about all the eyes that would be watching her, all the judgments that would be made based on every word and gesture. But for the first time since arriving at the palace, she felt truly prepared. She wasn't just playing a role anymore. She was becoming a version of herself that could thrive in this world while staying true to her core values. The garden doors opened before her, revealing a gathering of the kingdom's most powerful families. Sophia lifted her chin, remembering what Karim had told her that first night in Hawaii. True strength comes from being authentic. With that thought in her heart, she stepped forward to face whatever challenges awaited her among the roses and intrigues of the royal garden. The royal gardens were a masterpiece of design, with centuries-old fountains and carefully manicured paths, creating intimate spaces within the larger landscape. As Sophia made her way through the gathering, she could feel the weight of tradition in every ancient olive tree and carved marble bench. The kingdom's elite had turned out in full force for the garden party. Ladies in elegant traditional dress gathered in small groups, their conversations pausing briefly as Sophia passed. Distinguished gentlemen in formal attire nodded respectfully, though their eyes held careful assessment. "Miss Martinez," called Lady Fatima, one of the more conservative members of the court, "please join us. We were just discussing the upcoming Heritage Festival." Sophia recognized the invitation for what it was, a test. The Heritage Festival was one of the kingdom's most important cultural events, steeped in centuries of tradition. As she joined the group of ladies, she noticed several key members of the royal council nearby, clearly within earshot. "We were debating whether to maintain all the traditional elements this year," Lady Fatima continued, her tone deliberately casual. "Some feel certain customs might be outdated. What are your thoughts?" The question was a trap, and Sophia knew it. Support too much change and she'd alienate the traditionalists. Defend the old ways too strongly and she'd appear insincere. She thought carefully before responding. "The Heritage Festival is beautiful precisely because it connects the past to the present," she began, her voice clear and confident. "In Hawaii, we have a saying, "Auhe pauka ika ika halau ho'okahi." All knowledge is not taught in the same school. Perhaps the festival could be an opportunity to show how traditional wisdom guides us toward the future, rather than holding us in the past. Her use of Hawaiian wisdom to address their concerns caught them off guard. Even Lady Fatima looked impressed despite herself. From the corner of her eye, Sophia saw several council members lean in, listening more intently. The afternoon continued like a complex dance, with Sophia navigating one delicate interaction after another. She discussed economic development with business leaders, educational reform with academics, and cultural preservation with tribal elders. Each conversation was a challenge, but her genuine interest and careful study of the kingdom's history served her well. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the gardens, Karim appeared at her side. Protocol allowed them to interact more freely at social events, though still within strict boundaries. "You're winning them over," he murmured, as they strolled past a magnificent rose garden. "Even my father's oldest advisors are impressed." Before Sophia could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Princess Layla, Karim's cousin and one of the most influential young royals. She had been traveling abroad during most of Sophia's time at the palace, and this was their first meeting. "So this is the woman who's turned our world upside down," Layla said, her tone friendly but her eyes sharp. "Walk with me, both of you. I want to understand what makes this love worth challenging. Centuries of tradition. As they walked deeper into the gardens away from the main party, Layla asked increasingly direct questions about their relationship, their vision for the kingdom's future, and how they planned to balance tradition with progress. You know, Layla said, stopping near an ancient fountain, I was originally against this whole idea. I thought it would weaken our family's position, make us appear less committed to our cultural heritage. But watching you today, Sophia, you've shown remarkable grace under pressure. Thank you, Sophia replied carefully, sensing there was more to come. But grace isn't enough, Layla continued. Our kingdom faces real challenges. We need leadership that understands both our traditions and the modern world. Tell me, if you were to become our future queen, how would you address the growing divide between our conservative rural regions and our modernizing cities? The question wasn't just for Sophia, it was also directed at Karim, testing them both as a potential future leadership team. Sophia felt Karim tense beside her, but before he could speak, she touched his arm gently. Your Highness, she addressed. Layla, in my work in real estate, I learned that every community has its own character, its own needs. The key isn't to force either tradition or progress, but to help each region develop in a way that honors its unique identity while creating opportunities for growth. An diplomatic answer, Layla observed. But what about specific policies? Well, Sophia continued, drawing on her research of the kingdom's economic challenges, I've been studying your regional development programs. Perhaps we could create cultural enterprise zones that encourage traditional crafts and skills while providing modern business support and technology access. Let each region maintain its character while building bridges to the future. Layla's expression changed, genuine. Interest replacing diplomatic politeness. For the next hour, the three of them engaged in an intense discussion about the kingdom's future, with Sophia and Karim building on each other's ideas in a way that demonstrated their potential as a leadership team. As the garden party wound down, Layla pulled Sophia aside for one final moment. You're not what I expected, she admitted. You've done more than learn our ways. You found a way to bring your own perspective while respecting our traditions. That's rare. The princess glanced toward where King Hassan stood with his advisors, deep in discussion. The council meets tomorrow to discuss your future here. I think you've given them much to consider. As Layla departed, Sophia found herself alone for a moment in the gathering dusk. The scent of night-blooming jasmine filled the air, and the first stars were appearing in the desert sky. Tomorrow would determine everything. Whether love could truly bridge the gap between two worlds, whether tradition and progress could coexist, whether a real estate agent from Hawaii could really become part of this ancient royal lineage. Looking up at the palace that had become both her challenge and her home, Sophia felt a profound sense of peace. Whatever tomorrow brought, she knew she had remained true to herself while learning to navigate this new world. In doing so, she had shown that change didn't have to mean losing one's identity. It could mean growing into a stronger version of oneself. The morning of the council meeting dawned clear and bright over the palace. Sophia stood in the chamber adjacent to the grand council room, her heart beating steadily as Sarah helped her with the final adjustments to her formal attire. They had chosen an outfit that perfectly symbolized the bridge between cultures, a modern interpretation of traditional royal dress in the kingdom's colors but with subtle Hawaiian-inspired elements. Remember, Sarah said softly, no matter what happens in there, you've already accomplished something remarkable. You've shown that love can transform without destroying, that change can honor tradition while embracing progress. The massive doors to the council chamber opened, and Sophia was escorted inside. The room was impressive, with high ceilings decorated with intricate Islamic geometric patterns and walls lined with centuries of historical documents. The council members sat in a semicircle, with King Hassan at the center, Karim standing to his right. Miss Martinez, the king began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. 1 month ago, you accepted our challenge to prove that love could bridge the gap between two very different worlds. We have watched you closely during this time. Sophia stood tall, her chin lifted with quiet confidence as the king continued. "We have seen how you've approached our traditions, not with blind acceptance, but with genuine respect and understanding. We've observed your interactions with our people, from the highest nobles to the palace staff. We've noted your suggestions for modernizing our institutions while preserving their essential character." The king rose from his seat, descending, the few steps to stand before her. "But most importantly, we have watched how you've maintained your own identity while adapting to our ways. You have shown us that one need not lose oneself to embrace a new world." He turned to address the council. "When my son first defied tradition to follow his heart, I feared he was choosing personal happiness over his duty to our kingdom. I see, now that I was wrong. Sometimes the greatest service to tradition is to help it grow, to help it embrace the future without forgetting its roots." Karim stepped forward, his eyes shining with pride and love as he looked at Sophia. The king gestured for him to join them. "The council has deliberated at length," he announced. "We have considered not just the personal happiness of our crown prince, but the future of our kingdom, and we have concluded that perhaps it is time for our traditions to evolve, just as our kingdom must evolve to meet the challenges of a changing world." A murmur ran through the assembled council members as the king turned back to Sophia. "You came to us as a stranger, but you have proven yourself worthy not just of our prince's love, but of a place in our kingdom's future. The council hereby formally approves your union with Crown Prince Karim." Tears of joy welled in Sophia's eyes as Karim stepped forward to take her hands in his. But the king wasn't finished. "Furthermore," he continued, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth, "we believe that your unique perspective and proven ability to bridge different worlds will be valuable assets to our kingdom. Therefore, we are establishing a new Royal Commission for Cultural Integration and Modernization, to be headed by you and Prince Karim together." The announcement sent another wave of excitement through the chamber. This wasn't just approval of their marriage. It was an official recognition of Sophia's ability to contribute to the kingdom's future. Karim squeezed her hands gently before turning to address the council. "My beloved father, honored council members, you have shown great wisdom in recognizing that tradition and progress can strengthen each other. Sophia and I pledge to honor this trust you have placed in us." As the formal ceremony concluded, the king surprised everyone by pulling both Sophia and Karim into an embrace. "My children," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "may you lead our people into a future that honors our past while embracing new possibilities." Later that evening, Sophia and Karim stood in the palace's ancient garden, the same one where he had spent so many hours in his youth. The night-blooming flowers were opening, filling the air with their sweet fragrance. "Can you believe how far we've come?" Sophia asked, leaning into his embrace. "From a chance meeting in a Hawaiian cafe to this?" "I believed in us from the start," Karim replied, pulling her closer. "You showed me that being true to oneself is the greatest strength a leader can have. Together we'll show our people that love can build bridges between any worlds." As they stood there in the gathering dusk, the ancient palace walls behind them and the modern city sprawling before them, they knew they had written a new chapter in their kingdom's history, one that proved that true love could not only cross boundaries, but transform them into bridges for a better future. Fim da história. Queridos ouvintes, esperamos que a história de Sofia e Karim tenha tocado seus corações e mostrado que o amor verdadeiro pode superar qualquer obstáculo. Para continuar essa jornada emocional, preparamos uma playlist especial com histórias igualmente cativantes sobre amor, coragem e transformação. Encontrem-na aqui, clicando à esquerda. Se esta história os emocionou, não se esqueçam de se inscrever em nosso canal e dar like no vídeo. Todos os dias trazemos histórias únicas que exploram a complexidade da vida e o poder do amor. Compartilhem suas próprias histórias de amor e superação nos comentários abaixo. Juntos, podemos celebrar o poder do amor em transformar vidas e unir mundos diferentes. Até a próxima história.